So tonight I'm going to do a presentation on John Eldredge, the Ransomed Heart Ministry Mob, and the Wild at Heart boot camp that I just attended. I don't even really want to do it now, and I haven't wanted to do it for about 2 weeks since I've been there. I did it, the gathering at the end of November, and it was a great way to finish November in men's health. It was at Stanwell Tops Christian Conference Centre, and there was 400 men there. It was awesome. I really tried to work hard on expectations because I had been listening to John ever since I contacted Brandon Henry. If you ever watch these things, Brandon's a counsellor and a pastor from Arkansas. I met Brandon at a training in Arkansas last year, and it was he's a great man. I just knew we would be friends. I was inspired by him and felt like we had a lot in common. Our love of good music and the pipe. And I rang him earlier this year and just said, look, I'm having trouble getting in touch with God. I really felt like I was struggling with the 11th step and not feeling sort of a conscious contact. And I hang out with the Brotherhood CMC, and I've been going to street level community church, and I don't know, I just wasn't feeling it, and I felt like I'd been taken out, to use a Ransomed Heart phrase. And he said, well, look, I went to a boot camp with John Eldredge. He said he's got a new book out called Moving Mountains, and maybe it'll work for you. It worked for me. So as the way technology is these days, I'd already downloaded the book that morning, and I put it into my phone and went for a walk, and I reckon I'd listened to that whole book within 2 days. It just hit me. And then a big upheaval came about 2 weeks later as I'd been praying these prayers, and it changed the way I prayed instantly. Every time I read a chapter, it just changed more and more the way I prayed. And then I just started to devour the book. I didn't even know about Wild at Heart. I got that next, and then I got Fathered by God, and I've worked all things new. I'm going to not do John much good here. Since then, I've got the one on holiness. I've got the one on desire. I've got the Ransomed Heart app, and I've joined their tribe, and it puts you in. You can get the boot. There's so much content on there. I'm going to sound like an advertisement tonight, but if you have a higher power, and particularly a Christian, if you're not listening to John Eldredge and the Ransomed Heart crew, you're doing yourself a disservice. I just think they're really worth checking out. It might be a cup of tea. The other book I really loved was Beautiful Outlaw, that he wrote about the personality of Jesus. But my experience. So I had a lot of high hopes going into this thing. I'd started listening to sort of worship music, they call it, but music about God. And I'd never really, Brandon Heath, got turned on to Brandon Heath and did the same thing with him. John and Brandon just sort of bombarded my senses because I downloaded about 6 records of Brandon's and just got blown away. I was listening to him every day, listening to John every day. So when I went to the retreat, I was nervous but excited because I really thought I've listened to so much. It's got to be awesome, and it was. It was everything I hoped it would be. It was deep and moving and real and masculine. Like you didn't have to sort of shy away from being a bloke. They were selling cigars there. You could sit around the fire pit at night and have a cigar. There wasn't a dry camp, so there was people playing cards and drinking port. I never saw any drunkenness. I just saw people being real. And it was a surprise. I'm a 12-stepper. I'm a recovered alcoholic. I'm an addict. Go to NA. And I'd sort of been on a lot of retreats, but nothing like this. And I just turned up to everything. I got a seat right down the front. I never lost that seat. I bagged that seat for the rest of the weekend. And I didn't know anybody. A friend was going to come, but he was a bit turned off by some of the message. But the bits he was turned off was the bit that was turning me on, so it didn't bother me. I just thought I was glad I had no distractions. And I met, I had to sort of go there and meet some people, and I think one of the things that stopped me wanting to make a video about this and try and tell people about it is I sort of have that fear I won't do it justice. And I won't. I can't, because these guys have been doing it for nearly 20 years. And so I'll just talk about my experience and what stuck out for me. In early recovery, I found the work of Robert Bly, John Lee, James Hillman, Robert Moore, Michael Mead. These guys were giants. They opened my, listening to Robert Bly do it, tapes on Iron John and the way he played the bouzouki and do poetry. It just opened me up. So it expanded my 12-step recovery world into a much broader base. What I loved about Wild at Heart and John's work, he drew on all of that. He knew all of those stories, and so I was instantly in. He talked about getting a broadsword, and I've got a sword up this side here that I remember buying years ago after a men's retreat with a friend of mine. I just met him again the other day. I think I spoke about it in my last video, Rex McCann. So right from the get-go, I just love a couple of things, I suppose. They talk about the masculine journey, and it's from a Christian perspective, and they talk about Jesus's life and the fact that we're made in the Creator's image, and the stages that we need to go through, following the stages that he went through, but the stages of sort of having the experience of being a beloved son, and that then the sort of cowboy phase, the phase of boyhood where you really need to be validated. The beloved son, we really need the love of the father and the mother, but for men particularly too, the father, that we're to be fathered and seen and loved, to get that experience of being validated, starting to answer the beginning of that question, have I got what it takes here in the world? To then enter into a bona fide warrior stage where we really, now you've been loved and validated, you're now ready to really test yourself in the world. And there's a whole piece on adventure that I love. They talk about the three adventures of masculinity, the need in the cowboy phase of that sort of casual adventure, where you're learning to test yourself and be validated in that process, then moving to more crucial or critical adventure where it's really now an extending that validation and starting to invite in that life greater than you, and the relationship with God building, and then what they call epic adventure, which is sort of defined really by how much the kingdom of God is involved in that and how much it serves the kingdom. Again, please listen to Eldredge and the crew from Ransomed Heart to get a better explanation there. I was listening, I think it was this morning and yesterday, I was walking around the block on the app, on their tribe app, listening to the team speak in the basement about their relationship with those different levels of adventure. I just loved it. And then they talk about what gets in the way for men. And the stuff that stuck out for me is I was underfathered. I had one father I never met. He just got my mother pregnant from the pub at Yamina and never turned up again, so I don't even know his name, really. And then I was adopted at birth into a family, and my father was come from a long line of Englishmen, and they didn't feel, they didn't talk. My dad was largely provided for the family, and man, I was completely unvalidated by him, and his role was to try and help my mentally ill mother and get us to help him help her. So they talk about the wound and the wounding that happens, and it was very, I've done a lot of that work in therapy, but it was nice to do it in this perspective, just where is your wound, and it was really powerful, some of the presentations there, and then spending some time in reflection around that wound, and sort of asking God to heal that wound and get into a relationship with God around that wound, and part of the repair is becoming that, is asking God to be your father, to be fathered by God, this book, Fathered by God, and to have the wound healed. It talked about the when you're wounded, and then and the hiding. Bart Hansen sort of did a speech there on the 700, the Adam and the fig leaf and the fall, and what fig leaf do you hide behind? And they talk about the concept of the poser, and how as men, when you're unvalidated, you go out in the world trying to prove yourself all the time, and largely we're just hiding. You can hide in church, you can hide as a therapist, you can hide in a bike gang, you can hide anywhere. We're all hiding. So this idea, well, what is your fig leaf? What are you hiding? If you weren't posing, what would you be? And going into relationship and asking for God around that validation stage, the warrior stage, to really come into you and father you and initiate you into that, in that phase. And I love that stuff, man. I cried heaps over that. And then talking about then, this establishing this fathered by God and being in relationship with God as the Holy Father. And then this idea of that heroic Trinity, that the Bible starts as a heroic fellowship of the Trinity, and that we need a band of brothers to do this with. And that was sort of the whole idea of the Wild at Heart and the men's gathering. So just reflecting on my own hiding, I can hide as a recovering person, as a therapist. Lots of people have fond things to say about me because I've really given myself to this work, and I'm very grateful that I remember I got thrown out of school for a prank for a carton of beer, ended up a Boilermaker a week later, and I remember sitting there, welding inside these drums, just wishing I had a job packing groceries at Woolworths so I could speak to people. So I'm very grateful. I have regular waves of gratitude when I do the work I do. And then they talked about the stage of the lover, and even as in your relationship with Jesus, that you can, ask God to initiate you into the lover, and talked very much about the relationship with the feminine, and that was, something that I've really missed out. I saw my dad sort of provide, but as a caretaker for my mother, I'd say that I love that saying, and I remember it from Bly and John Lee, that don't hand a man a sword who can't dance, and I don't, I think I've had a lot of posing around the lover and don't feel comfortable or adequate in that area at all. And then going on to talk about the stages of the king and the absence of kings in men's lives, and God needing to step into that place for him to be that king, and it's why we need initiated men around us, that we can be in more kingship, we can be reliable and trustworthy, and if you can make it through that phase, we make it to that sage phase. That just because you're old doesn't mean you grow into that level of initiated maturity. And all these things are attractive to me. I want them, and I haven't got them at the level I'd like. But I suppose the one big bit I got out of it was just so much open-heartedness from the presenters, and then experiencing the men around me really open-hearted. The talks around the fire at night, just that, people want more, and I want more too. I want more of this relationship. And I realized, it hit me before I even went to this retreat. I hadn't really been working the 11th step the way that I should in the 12-step program around, through prayer and meditation, praying only for the knowledge of God's will and the power to carry that out. I thought I haven't spent enough time in this relationship. And, one of the things they talk about, which, sort of spooked my mate that didn't want to come, but this idea that we're at war, that if you believe this doctrine and believe this particular story, this epic story of God, that we're at war. And that if you're not really factoring that into this, then you're really missing something crucial. And I felt that with the things in my addictions and the things that take me out. And I feel, I got baptized by Greg Hurst 25 years ago down Stemple Tops, and I felt taken out by a whole bunch of stuff: work, food, sex, other religions, other belief systems. It took me a long time to get back to this. And so this idea of prayer around protection, it just spoke to me. It mightn't speak to you if you're listening to this, but this idea that it's not the sugar industry that's my enemy, it's the enemy that's my enemy. It's not the porn industry. It's that there's a dark force and a light force in this universe, and if I don't sort of take that seriously, then I really run the risk of being sort of neutered by this spiritual warfare. Now, I don't think I can do this justice, this talk about that. I'm probably speaking too cautiously about it already. But I get a lot out of listening to it, and I got a lot more to learn about this. And I loved what they talk about in these books, especially, Fathered by God, Wild at Heart, Beautiful Outlaw, and Moving Mountains. They really talk about how to pray against that stuff. So if anything I've said interests you, go for Moving Mountains. If something I'm saying here is aggravating you, then let it go, because it's just what's moved me. So going through that weekend, really trying to remove that part of me, the poser part, really being open to sharing my wound with others, being really open to being fathered by God, having God sort of come into those tender places as a lover, to be willing to have God's kingship offered to me, and to move towards sageship one day, that would be great. I just sort of gave me real hope. And so much so that one of my things is I've had this agreement. They talk about what agreements do you have, and one of the agreements I've certainly had is I don't hear God, I don't feel it. I went and found this waterfall where we used to have these gatherings many years ago, men's gatherings down there. So, and I had this real strong, that quiet, still voice, that strong intuition to ask John to baptize me. And I thought, that's not going to happen. This is crazy. It's just self-centered and selfish, and, that could be the spiritual attack. But I thought, no, you know what? A friend of mine, what really happened is a friend of mine who wanted the courage to ask someone out, but really doubted they could do it. And I remember saying, go ahead, man. And anyway, she got back to me and sent me a message. I did it, and we're going to have a coffee date. I thought, wow, well, she can ask him, I can ask John. So I put it to John. He said, sure. So at lunchtime on the Sunday, while everyone was eating, we had the pool to ourselves, and he met me there, and with his crew, some of his crew. And, he baptized me. And I remember that day, I went after being baptized, and they went off, and I had a swim, and then I got on my bike, and I thought, well, I had this intuition to find a Bible and a cross. And I thought, well, this is sort of crazy. I'm on the coast. It's Sunday. There's going to be hamburger stores, and that's about it open, and cafes. And so anyway, I've had about an hour to ride, so I rode down the coast. And I got to where I thought, I need to really turn around, get something to eat and turn around. And I saw these bikes by this pub. So there's a bunch of Harleys in a row, so I thought I'd back the Triumph in there, and I just stopped. And right across the road, tucked out of the way, I wouldn't send it from the highway, was this bookstore. So I walk in. And I said, look, which happened, there was just a general bookstore, looked like like a Collins bookstore or something, a Dimmicks or something like that. So I walked in and said, do you have any Bibles? They had one Bible. So that's what I bought. I bought this book. And then when I came out, I thought I'll get something to eat. And I looked across the road, there was a food store. And then right next to it was an antique store. And then I went in there and said, look, do you have any crosses for sale? And she said, well, I think we might have one. And they had this white gold cross there. And so I bought it. And I thought, my head was just saying, it's weird and stupid. And what are you doing this for? It's just posering, And then I was trying to think, well, no, this ain't posering. I just got baptized after 25 years of feeling like I'd been taken out. And what I mean by taken out, I'd spent years studying shamanism. I spent years trained by Annie Whitefeather at it from Sedona, and I met a partner who was into Sai Barbara and went to his ashram twice, and spent some time devoted to that, and workaholism, food addiction, sex addiction, things that were taking me out that I had to deal with in my recovery. And so I thought, this is the warfare he's talking about. So I just didn't invite it in. And I remember riding back with the Bible in my saddlebags, the cross around my neck with the boot camp. This is the sort of dog tag that they give you for attending the boot camp. And that's what I sort of went into that night with. And that was the Sunday. And that morning we'd listened to worship music for the first time there. And they said, look, we haven't played this up till now because we figured everyone would go to that religious posering. And so I was really moved. So I was listening to Brandon Heath. I got my Brandon Heath t-shirt on. And I was just riding back, listening to Brandon Heath. Beautiful sunny day on the bike. And then, did Sunday night there and Monday, and just loved it. So I'm grateful because I got 3 boys here. Marshall, who's 7, nearly 8. Maverick, who's 5, nearly 6. And Harland, who'll be in the middle of next year. He'll be 3. And I come from a long line of men. One guy I don't even know, and the other guy was from a long line of men that just didn't talk about nothing. And I'm humbled by what's in front of me. And I feel overwhelmed by the task of trying to be a good dad for 3 boys. And what I love about what John's message is that that's too big a job for anybody. And I'm meant to introduce them to God. I'm meant to father them through God. I'm fathered by God. Morgan, who's one of the Ransomed Heart Ministry guys and does the Becoming Good Soil retreats, he told a wonderful story about his wife really suffering, and he had to take his 3-year-old son over to his mother's and spend the summer there while his wife healed at her parents' place. And he said that his little boy, when they were 3, they were camping out in the ground, their mum's place, in the lunch room, and he said, "Oh, Dad, I think we're brothers," and he thought he was just being cute. And he said, "No, Dad, if I'm if God is my father and God is your father, that makes us brothers." And he said he cried, and he cried when he told that story. I cried when I heard him tell that story. But I thought, you know what, I want to bring the spirit of that into this family and into my boys' lives, and do whatever I need to do to be part of healing and health for them. So, there's a lot more I suppose I could say, but I won't. I'm still reading and learning. If anything I've said has inspired you, please check out John Eldredge and the Ransomed Heart Ministries. They've got a great profile on Instagram, YouTube. There's some wonderful stuff on YouTube just to check out to see if you like it. But the books and the tapes and man, don't miss out on joining the tribe, because there's all this other stuff that goes on. So I hope I've done the Ransomed Heart guys justice. It was life-changing for me. I'm glad I did this video, because I was thinking, I don't know enough, I shouldn't do it. And I'm thinking that's just the enemy too. It was one of the great moments of my life. And I thank them guys. I'll remember that forever. And my walk with God now feels as though I'm listening and I'm hearing and I'm alive in God. So God bless you, and take care and be gentle with your heart today.